petrified closed clams. It had to be buried alive quickly. If the water came up 200 feet and came in at 900 miles an hour, it's going to make a layer of mud 50 feet thick in 10 seconds.
Tonight, we're going to be going over inmate, I don't know all of his numbers, it ends in 017, quote-unquote Dr. Kent Hovind, fellow Alabamian and local dumbass. He is going to be debunking the geologic column only using the best evidence that creationists can muster. Which, the best evidence that creationists can muster is not good evidence. It's actually quite fucking ridiculous. He's going to say a number of ridiculous things tonight, so do get your face palm oven mitt protection gear ready, because you're going to be face palming yourself all night long. But if you guys want to fuck around and find out how quote unquote Dr. Dino or Dr. Kent Hovind tries to debunk the geologic column, then please stay tuned. What's up, heathens? How ya doing? Kent Hovind. He's going to be teaching us about the geologic column tonight, guys. I don't know if y'all know this, but he doesn't know shit about the geologic column. Kent Hovind, Matt Powell, they're all pretty simple. Kent Hovind's going to say some kind of quirky things here. He's also going to say some very unscientific things, but he's going to claim that he's being scientific. So if you have a bingo card for Kent Hovind, get ready to stamp that motherfucker. Maybe I should do some official ones and like give out a prize or something like that for anybody that hits. Instead of bingo, it should be like, I don't know, whale dick or something. Or Kent. I don't know. Anyways, I'll flesh that idea out later. Okay, let me get my headset in. Let's start this train wreck.
Hey folks, here we are at Dinosaur Adventureland in Lenox, Alabama. This was a gravel pit for years. They dug down about 30 feet of all the gravel, sand, and clay out of here, and they stopped right here at this cliff. You can still see these gravel layers. These layers go all the way to North Carolina, 500 miles. Why would there be gravel layers? It's gravel, sand, clay. The kids are taught in school that each of the layers of the earth is a different age. The geologic column is one of the biggest lies ever taught in the history of the world. The geologic column does not exist. There's no such thing as a Jurassic age or Triassic or Mississippian. It's all baloney. All these layers formed at the same time. They say the top layer's younger. I say, really? Where did it come from?
Well, okay, so he's taken a long time to get to what I was wanting to point out. So where do the new layers come from? And that's just, well, general sediment settling from dust storms, from the different weather systems that operate in like the rock cycle.
Every time people come to our tour here, we show them this little jar that I shake up. It always settles out into gravel, sand, clay. Gravel, sand, clay.
Okay, yes. So what he's trying to assert here, which he'll say a bit more in his video later on, is basically that the layers that we perceive in the geologic column is just a natural sorting of heavier and denser material that floats to, or not floats, but sinks to the bottom, and then the lighter material piles on top of that and piles on top. And he's using the area that he's in order to suggest that that's exactly what happened, because there's all of those, there's all that gravel and stuff back there. I'm gonna get to why that's all there here in a minute when he actually brings it up. The geologic column definitely cannot be because of the natural sorting that happens in fluid dynamics. And that's simply because, like, well, you'll find multiple coal seams, right, in the strata that you find in certain areas. And that it simply can't be a natural sorting of things, because what you have is the coal was transformed into coal from living plant matter. Or, well, I guess dead plant matter. It was living at one time, but then it died. Through millions of years and pressure and all that, it turns into coal. But you'll find multiple levels of it, and this is multiple times where this area was like washed away by a flood or some kind of natural disaster, and then just by the natural rock cycle or the natural weather cycles of the earth gets covered up, and then new life grows on top of it and it gets destroyed again. And so you end up with multiple seams of coal running through it. And so it simply cannot be that way because of the different densities of material that exist within the geologic column. You can't explain that with just natural sorting. You can only explain it through uniformitarianism, which is just the gradual laying down of layer after layer after layer, building this historical window into the past of what happened in that area.
Every time people come, we flip this little thing over, and it always makes hundreds of little bitty layers.
Well, you see, Kent doesn't understand that is a far different thing than layers of rock and sediment and all that being piled on top of each other, over millions of years. Like, that is significantly different than what you see in the geologic column.
This whole flipping the jar thing over reminds me of that stupid ass Mo Brooks, and the rocks falling in the ocean makes the water rise.
Yeah, it was really stupid.
Just on we're talking on wholly different scales here, sir.
Now wait a minute. They tell the kids the layers are different ages. If you shuffle a deck of cards, is the top card younger? No, they're all the same age.
Well, so he's saying, like, if you shuffle a deck of cards, is the top card younger? No, it's not, but that's also not how geology works. It's not how uniformitarianism works. If you were to take one card and set it down, and then, like, 100,000 years later, you set down another card. And then
every year you set down a card, then you've got a deck of cards full of cards from 52 different years, you shuffle them, and yes, one card is... Well,
I wasn't trying to be as granular as, like, once every year. I was trying to encapsulate, like, a lot of layers in, like, one card, trying to shrink it down and make the point a little bit more succinct by putting down, like, one card, then 100,000 years, another card. So, I mean, in reality, it works. Like, every year there's a new layer, whatever. But just to make the point here, if you were to put down a card every 100,000 years onto a stack, yes, the top card on the deck would be significantly younger than the card on the bottom, or any card in the middle, or any card beneath it. It would be younger than it. So, I mean, he's just misrepresenting how geology and everything works. Our natural world works.
This geologic column is one of the biggest hoaxes ever. All over the world, petrified trees are found standing up, connecting all the layers. Well, how long does a dead tree stand around? Here at this latitude in Lennox, 31 degrees above the equator, we're turning almost 900 miles an hour.
Okay, before he gets into this, he's talking about the rotation of the Earth, but he's about to say something really stupid. He asked about what's called by this particular community Polystrate Fossils. It's interesting because we've understood these tree fossils for a while, and it didn't really pose a problem for geologists back in the 19th century, and it doesn't pose a problem for us now, because the vast majority of the time, what you find with these quote unquote polystrate fossils are that the root systems of that tree are fossilized in the layer just beneath the trunk. And so you see that the tree was firmly planted there the entire time. Now, whether it got covered up partially very quickly and then slowly over time it got covered, or maybe it all got covered like at once or something, in some kind of fashion, it doesn't really matter, because we have the fossils of the root system to the tree that's standing there. So yes, it did just stand there dead. I mean, dead trees just staying there is a thing that can happen, and it being buried slowly over time is a very plausible thing. But the point is that we've known about this since the 19th century. Kent Hovind is banking on you not knowing this, not knowing that the information's out there. If you just go to Talk Origins and you look through their material and you get to the Polystrate Fossil section, there's a whole article on it where in the 19th century we solved this issue. So the trees were always there. They were firmly planted there. And it's not that the trees were quickly covered by some kind of flood. If a global flood did happen, could that occur? Sure. But is it the most plausible explanation? No. But he's so firm on his position that he cannot consider any other position. He only considers his creationist position. And so he has to misrepresent the science on how all this occurred.
The sideways moving water at 900 miles an hour would take all the rocks and roll them against each other like a rock tumbler does and round them off. All over the world, gravel is rounded. They call it river rock. No, this is from the flood. It was rounded back and forth by the tide going back and forth.
Okay, for one thing, I don't understand what he means by tide going back and forth. Because as I understand it, the world flooded and stayed flooded for a year. So I don't understand what he means by, there was a tide going back and forth and everything like that. So Kent Hovind here is saying that at where he's at, or where essentially I'm at, on the Earth, we're moving at 900 miles an hour. So water is moving at 900 miles an hour. And that's how these rocks got rounded, because it acts like a tumbler. Now, if you guys don't know, those water jets that they use to cut steel, they move water, they shoot water out at 900 miles an hour. He thinks that the water shooting out at a speed that's great enough to cut steel is just simply rounding these rocks out. I feel like that water would pulverize these rocks. He's trying to push this whole idea that the ocean's moving at 900 miles an hour, rounded off these rocks, and it was not a slow erosion of the rocks by like running water through a river or something like that. I think he's about to go a little bit more in depth in this, but I just wanted you guys to understand. He thinks 900 mile an hour water simply smooths rocks.
These rounded rock layers go to North Carolina. If that's a river, that's a big river, 500 miles.
Right, it's 500 miles, but if you consider what North America looked like at this point in time when he's talking about, if you will notice, it's fucking underwater. So yes, a slow erosion of these rocks into smooth rocks via water slowly eroding them is very plausible. As you can tell, and this just comes from Wikipedia about the Appalachia region. As you can tell, this area that we're in right now was underwater, and there was actually a sea that bisected the United States. And you could see there was an inlet that even cut up into Canada and everything like that. So it makes no sense to say, oh, it must have been a global flood, when we know, well, there's all the telltale signs in all of these areas that this was the most likely shape of this particular continent or this particular area on the globe. So I don't understand why he would think that a global flood is more plausible than just this area was covered by water and that's why the gravel is round. But then again, I'm not a creationist dickhead. A whale dickhead. A whale of a dickhead!
All over the world, petrified clams are found. Normally when you find seashells along the beach, as soon as they die, they open. Well, and you hardly ever find a matched pair. But all over the world, petrified clams are found in the closed position. Petrified closed clams. It had to be buried alive quickly. If the water came up 200 feet and came in at 900 miles an hour, it's going to make a layer of mud 50 feet thick in 10 seconds and bury the clam bits. They find petrified closed clams on top of Mount Everest, tallest mountain in the world full of seashells. Today, the world's record biggest oyster is 14 inches. They find fossilized oysters in the mountains in Peru, 500 of them, all bigger than the world's record. Here's a guy laying on one. There's an 11.5-foot oyster found 2 miles above sea level. I think there was a flood.
I think there was a flood. He's talking about clams, and not in the fun way.
petrified closed ones. Kent, that's because they're near you.
Don't worry, he'll just body slam them.
Oh no.
Oh no. So he's talking about petrified clams and how sometimes they're found closed. This can happen whenever like they get covered rapidly underwater.
Or near Kent.
Or near Kent. Clams, they
just snap right shut as soon as he comes near. Same happens to Ken here.
Clams slam shut and die when they get near Kent Hovind.
Dried up, petrified.
Dried up and petrified clams. Anyways, so Kent here is portraying this as being evidence of a worldwide flood. Anything that can be explained by this whole worldwide flood thing is also equally and more plausibly explained just by these clams being covered quickly by mud or by anything else. Like it happens. And then he mentioned the seashells that are found on top of Mount Everest. If I know that Ken knows this, but he rejects it. It doesn't really matter if the large clams are real or not, because clams that are shut and found and fossilized shut are easily explainable by just being quickly covered by mud or whatever, and not being and still being alive. So they were basically buried alive and fossilized. And I mean that's incredibly plausible without the need for a flood. So whether or not there were big clams, yeah, but it's good to know that these giant clams aren't exactly what he claims that they are. Dragon Master says, if the earth flooded like Kent says it did, there would be no fresh water. That's true. There would be no fresh water. So all of the freshwater animals would have died, but I don't know how he gets around that. Another interesting point to make is that if the entire world flooded, there are several salt basins out there that are hundreds of meters thick. It's kind of hard to explain that with the whole global flood theory, because salt concentrations in that amount would have killed any life in the water. I know at least Ken Ham thinks that life that was in the water survived in the flood, so you really didn't have to worry about them. You just had to worry about the life on land. But if the salt concentration were to be what it needed in order to lay down the layers of salt in these salt basins, then you would definitely kill all the life in the water. I wonder what his favorite wrestling move is. You think it's like the power bomb? I think it's probably the power bomb.
If the water came up 200 feet and came in at 900 miles an hour, it's going to knock all the trees down.
I'm sorry, it wouldn't just knock all the trees down, Kent. Coming in at 900 miles an hour would utterly fucking destroy a forest. Like, that's the speed needed to cut fucking steel. And you think that it's just gonna knock down a forest? The fuck, Kent? Poof. Like my bones in the morning. Poof.
And bury them under a layer of mud and form coal. You know, coal is always found in seams. No exception. Sometimes multiple layers of coal. Coal, gravel, well, that's the tide going back and forth, a different tide.
So I'm guessing that Kent's view of how the flood happened was that it happened gradually. That the earth started to flood and it took a long time to flood. What Kent does is he supposes that there was water underneath the earth, right? And it was a certain amount of miles. It's like 5 to 15 miles below the crust of the earth. And for water to shoot out from underneath the crust up, it would, for one, heat the water up so much due to the friction and speed that it would vaporize and it would superheat the surface of the earth. So there's no way that Noah could have survived that. But let's just say that the earth did flood. It makes no sense for there to be like these tides that he's talking about, and for tides to lay down specific amounts of layers. Now, before he pointed out, let me see if I can go back in this thing. He pointed out all of these different seams of coal there, right? You see all of them. Now, I feel like in this one image, Kent Hovind has provided enough evidence to show that creationism is bullshit. Because For one thing, it takes millions of years for coal to form. This is due to the fact that it's dead organic matter that is compressed and it eventually turns into coal. And that process takes a long time. Millions of years. And Kent would say that, well, it doesn't take millions of years if you just have high heat and pressure, then it would form quicker. Okay, let's run with that idea. So let's just suppose this. What you're saying is that these high tides would come in and destroy and lay down plant matter, right? So let's just say like right here, of course, you've got multiple different layers before this, but let's start right here with this particular one. A dead plant matter is laid down right here. And then Kent is proposing rapid formation of this coal. Let's just say right here, we've got plant matter being laid down. And then he wants us to believe rapid formation of coal occurred, and then more layers were laid down on top of that. I don't understand how this makes any kind of sense. Because even if coal rapidly formed, the fossilized root systems of the plants that formed the coal seam are present in the layer just below the coal seam. So you're trying to tell me that there was enough time in order for the coal to form, but also enough time for the plants used to form the coal could take root. And that happens at every layer. At every layer, as you can tell in this picture, because at every layer, you're going to find a root system, right? At every single layer, you're going to find a root system that's been fossilized. And then you see the current layer on top of all of that, which could be devastated by some kind of flood, some kind of natural disaster, could like squash it all and replace the top layer with just whatever layer comes on top of it next, and then that will turn into the next coal seam. So I don't understand why he thinks this is proof of a worldwide flood. He just arbitrarily says that it's the high tides or whatnot that are going in and out and developing these things. I don't understand any of this because it doesn't make sense.
Every 6 hours, 12 and a half minutes, you'd have a tidal change. Noah was in the Ark for 880 tidal changes.
How does he fucking know this? How is he determining this shit? How does he know how many tidal changes Noah went through? I feel like he's taking what we know about the geologic column and working backwards in order to arbitrarily propose shit about fucking Noah.
The water came up, down, in, out, 880 times.
Wait, the water went up, down, in, out. Why is it only moving in those, like, it's only moving horizontally or vertically? How does he know this? Citation fucking needed. Thank you very much, dipshit.
He'd make all these layers in one day, not millions of years.
I guess because all of the layers that he's talking about are relatively low in number, and so that means that these layers would have been formed quickly because of the amount of tides going in and out that he arbitrarily seems to assign to Noah's experience. I don't know where in the world he's getting this, other than he must be working backwards from like the geologic column as it exists. And then in order to explain that on the flood model, it has to do this number of times. So he's working from the conclusion backwards to his premises.
We shook this up a few minutes ago. It's already settling out. Gravel, sand, clay. Give it a few more minutes, see what it does. It does it every time. The flood explains all the geology of the world.
No, the flood doesn't. The flood doesn't explain, like just in this video talking about the coal seams, the flood doesn't explain why there are fossilized root systems in the layers just below the coal seams, why there are soil horizons just below the coal seams. Why on earth is any of this a thing if there was a global flood? And there's so many other things that we could bring up, and actually the people over at Talk Origins actually have a really good list of reasons why the whole flood hypothesis is just fucking wrong. Let's see. Let's run through this list real quick. The existence of desert deposits is quite hard to place in the context of a global flood. This comes from Morris and Morris in 1989. The geologic column is not divided up by hydrodynamic sorting. This is shown by Whitcomb and Morris in 1961. The geologic column is not sorted by ecological zones. The Silurian Interlake, Devovian Prairie, Pennsylvania Menalusa, and Jurassic Morrison formations are continental deposits. Oceanic deposits sandwich those beds. The ocean came and went many times. You can't explain that on a flood. The persistent burrowing, which is found throughout the geologic column, the erosional layers, and the evaporated salt requires much more time than a single year to account for the whole column. The fact that the fossil mammals are not found with the earliest dinosaurs and that no primates are found until the Fort Union Formation, or that no full dinosaur skeletons are found in the tertiary section, implies strongly that the column was not the result of a single cataclysm. Until Christian catastrophists can explain the facts of the geologic column, they need to tone down their rhetoric against the geologists and other scientists. That comes from Paul Steidl, 1979. This entire idea has been fought for such a long fucking time. And if you want to know more, you can go to talkorigins.org. There's an entire article about the geological column that refutes everything that this fuck is saying. So definitely go and check that out, because that's actually written by somebody that knows their shit. I'm not claiming to be an expert, obviously. I mean, I thought the Mississippian era was a time when rednecks roamed the earth. Don't trust me. Trust the experts. And the experts are saying that what he says is bullshit, and they have the evidence to back up their claims that his shit is bullshit.
There is no such thing as a geologic column. One of the biggest lies ever taught to kids in school. They say during the Archean era, there's no such thing as an Archean era. This geologic column that they teach is the Bible to the evolutionist, number one.
No, it's not the Bible. This is nowhere near. We've changed our minds on geology, the geologic column. Like, it can easily be changed. The Bible is not easily changed, so I don't know what the fuck he's talking about right there. Regardless of whether or not you want to recognize the age of those layers are still there, and whether or not we apply one label or another to them, you still have to account for those layers. So I don't know why he's quibbling over the names of these layers. He's just, I guess, angry because the layers have the connotation of the age. Radioactive dating would definitely fuck his shit up, because the down here on this layer would render a very old age compared to this top layer. So he would have to explain why the radioactive dating of those materials would render such different results.
And it's an absolute lie.
Sorry, that was it. That was all his video. Gonna get back to this screen with the spooky background. All in all, just to give kind of a recap, while I was wrong about the Mississippian era, it was not about rednecks roaming the plains. I found Kent's video very unimpressive. It was a very basic bitch type of video. He had the very basic arguments. He had the clam argument. So I don't know if anybody has their Kent Hovind bingo card or their Cretaceous bingo card, and they stamp clams, but clams definitely die near Kent Hovind. And then he had the hydrostatic sorting, which doesn't explain everything. And he had 900-mile waters rounding off pebbles instead of pulverizing them or cutting them in half or whatever in the fuck. I think that if you had one of those water jets that shot water out at 900 miles an hour that cut steel, I think that steel is much harder than like the fucking pebbles that he has. So I feel like if water hit pebbles going 900 miles an hour, it would definitely pulverize them. It would not just simply round that shit off. But in any case, I'm not surprised. But at the same time, I do have to say that as in general with Kent Hovind, I learn things from Kent. Not because he's right about anything that he says, but because when I investigate the claims that he makes, I find out information that's true. I find out the reasons why he's wrong. It's crazy to think that somebody being as wrong as Kent Hovind can cause you to learn things because they are so wrong. I hope that I've done that for people. Like the fact that I've been wrong about something has caused them to look up the real information, or has seen me in real time look up the information because I was wrong, has caused them to be more just more educated. I like if that's what's happened here tonight, that people have learned something about the geologic column, then I think that's great, because you guys have learned something and I have learned something, and we are better for that. So if you guys will, please smash that like button, subscribe, leave a comment with what you thought about this video, and don't forget to stand up and use your voice. Bye, heathens.